I have been listening today and a few other days, I think, about Senator Gillibrand's efforts to bring up what I think is a major reform of the military justice system to the point to where you won't recognize it as it is today. And I hope you understand what you're being asked to do here. So Senator Reid, who's the chairman of the committee, has been objecting. And before I got here, I was a military lawyer and active duty in the reserves for about 33 years. I was a prosecutor, defense attorney, and judge. And what I'd like to challenge the body to do is find me cases where the judge advocate has recommended prosecution in a sexual assault case in the last 8 years, and the commander refused to go forward. I was in the military, JAG Corps, for 33 years. I can only remember one time where that was even an issue. And previous efforts to reform the system works like the following. If the JAG recommends a prosecution in a sexual assault case, as defined in the last piece of legislation, and they refuse to go forward, is taken to the commander's commander. So what problem are we trying to solve here? What we're doing in this bill is relieving the chain of command when it comes to military justice. If the commander no longer is concerned about sexual assaults in the barracks, we've made a huge mistake. The heart and soul of the military justice system is to provide a fair trial to the accused, take care of victims, but give the commander the tools they need for good order and discipline. So the idea of taking the commander out of the chain of command when it comes to terrible things like sexual assault, I think is a bad idea, because it's the commander's job to make sure that unit works well. And having a bunch of professional prosecutors make the decision without the commander being involved is basically relieving the commander of what's best for that unit overall. Sexual assault is a problem in the military, it's a problem in the civilian world, it's a problem all over the place. But the military justice system is designed to bring about good order and discipline. And I can only say that the day that the commander is taken out of the responsibility for what happens in that unit is a bad day for good order and discipline, and I think a bad day for that unit. Again, the legal advice given to commanders in cases like we're talking about is almost universally followed. There's probably been more occasions where the commander will take a iffy case to court just to make a point, cases that would never probably get off first base in the civilian world. But the people pushing this bill always talk about results in court-martials. I think the worst thing the United States Senate could do is create an impression that a not guilty verdict is unacceptable in the military. Sometimes a not guilty verdict is the right answer to the situation presented to the court. So I'm beginning to doubt whether or not you can get a fair trial in the military if you're accused of one of these crimes. When politicians attack results in the system, we're sending a pretty clear signal, if you're on a court-martial panel member, that we're going to be grading your homework here in the Senate, because there seems to be a bias that the only outcome must be a guilty verdict. Truth of the matter is, a lot of women go to their grave having been assaulted and never report the event to anybody. And we need to make it easier for victims to come forward. But on occasion, people are accused of things they didn't do. I've been involved in many of these cases, and on occasions, you'll find out that the accusation doesn't hold water, not sufficient to be anywhere near beyond a reasonable doubt. And sometimes people say things are just flat not true. So what I worry about, Mr. President, is that in our effort to reform the system to solve a problem that really doesn't exist, commanders ignoring the JAGs and not prosecuting people because they like them or they have favoritism, that's not a problem. If you want to talk about reforming the military justice system, fine, but let's don't stand here in the United States Senate and say that commanders in the military routinely turn down legal advice to prosecute. They don't. That's just not true. In the military, in a general court-martial, you need 3/4 to convict. If we're going to go down this track of talking about what an acceptable outcome should be, then I'm going to start introducing legislation to change the requirement of the verdict to be unanimous. I was a prosecutor for 4.5 years and a defense attorney for 2. I understand sort of the military courtroom environment, and the panel members, the members of the jury, are commissioned officers, or you can request non-commissioned officers. The accused has that right up to a certain percentage of the panel. And these panels are constructed not like a civilian court. They're constructed to make sure that the jury usually comes from the officer corps and people with the responsibility for that base are picked to serve on these juries to make sure that the base is being well run, people receive justice who have been violated, and those accused of a crime have a fair trial. The worst thing can happen is when a commander seems to have favorites and the people he likes get away with almost anything, and the people the commander doesn't like, well, they look for reasons to come down hard on him. So when I was a young JAG, I'd go talk to commanders and first sergeants. The worst thing you can do to a unit is to play favorites. Call them as you see them. You need to show up in the middle of the night as a commander and first sergeant in the barracks. When they least think you're going to come, just let people know you're watching them, because most enlisted people are 18 to 22-year-old, first time away from home. So we've made some strides that I think are good. We provide victims of sexual assault in the military with their own individual counsel. Most people don't get that in the civilian world. We're trying to train prosecutors how to handle these cases. I like that. But if we're going to start creating a presumption here, contrary to being innocent, that there's only one right answer, then we need to start training a bunch of defense attorneys and having a specialty there. Because the worst thing that can happen in a military unit is for somebody to be assaulted, be treated poorly, and nothing happens. And second to that is for somebody to be accused of something that is seen as not legitimate. And that's why you have trials. That's why you have defense attorneys. That's why you have judges. That's why you have prosecutors. But the thing unique about the military is this not a jury of your peers. The jury is made up of the officer corps on that base who has responsibilities usually to run the base. And you can request it as a enlisted member that a part of the panel be enlisted, but they're going to be the most senior ranks on the base. They're not going to be E3 and 4s, they're going to be E8s and E9s. They're going to be the senior enlisted corps responsible for good order and discipline and morale on the base. That's what's unique about the military justice system. I found as a defense attorney that people look long and hard at the government's case. I'll talk later on about some cases I had where people were accused of using drugs by urinalysis, and the system was fatally flawed, and over time the military justice system got that right. So I just want Senator Reid to know that slowing this train down and getting the members of this body to understand what we're talking about, I will support him more. I should be down here talking more. Like everybody else, we're busy. So I promise to come down more to give my side of what we should be thinking about in terms of reform, and why what's before us is not reform. It's a radical change to the military justice system based on what I think a premise that doesn't exist. The one thing I want you to know, I don't believe there are a handful of cases in the Army, the Air Force, the Marine Corps, the Navy a year where the commander refuses to go forward after the JAGs have recommended a court-martial in sexual assault cases. And that's what we're all supposed to be worried about, that the system is biased against victims. What can we do to make it easier to report these situations? What can we do to convince people that the command is not going to turn on you if you're a victim? These are all legitimate things. But to fire the entire chain of command based on a premise that I think doesn't hold water, would be bad and would, over time, undercut the military's ability to maintain good order and discipline and to be the effective fighting force. So Senator Reid, as the chairman of the committee, I will try to do more to help him. I respect Senator Gillibrand a lot. She's very passionate about this. But all I can say is that passion and justice has to be measured. And we have to be making decisions based on facts, not just an outcome that we would like. And when we start talking about cases where somebody was acquitted as if that was the wrong result, that scares the hell out of me. With that, I will yield the floor and notice the absence of a quorum.
The clerk will call the roll.